Friends, if you are ready to dive into a world of blocks, adventures, and endless creativity, then you have come to the perfect place because today we are going to talk about one of the most awaited films of the coming year, a Minecraft movie 2025. If you are visiting our channel for the very first time, make sure to subscribe so you never miss exciting updates about movies like this. In this video, we will explore every possible detail about this film, what it is all about, where you will be able to watch it, and all the fascinating behind-the-scenes facts that fans have been eager to know. Minecraft has been a game that turned imagination into reality, where players could build, survive, and create anything they desired. Now, that beloved pixelated universe is being brought to life in a cinematic way that fans have been waiting for years. We will talk about the platforms where this movie will be available, whether it will be released on OTT services or satellite channels, and the expected timeline for its release around the globe. We will take you behind the scenes to explore how this movie was made, from its early planning and pre-production to its filming locations and the advanced techniques used to recreate the iconic blocky world on the big screen. You will get to know about its post-production process, the visual effects that shape its landscapes, the budget that went into making this large-scale project, and what its box office expectations look like before the official release. Apart from that, we will dive into its storyline to see what kind of adventure awaits the fans. Is it going to be a survival journey, a building quest, or a completely new story that connects with both gamers and movie lovers? We will also introduce you to the cast, talk about the characters they are playing, and how their performances bring depth and life to this unique world of creativity and challenge. I will also share my quick review of the story concept and highlight some of the most interesting facts about the making of this film, things that most people do not know yet. Was it filmed in one location or several? How much influence did the game creators have in shaping the narrative? All of this will be discussed in detail. So stay with me till the very end of this video as we uncover every little detail about a Minecraft movie 2025, its journey from a virtual game to a blockbuster movie, and why it is becoming one of the most talked about releases of the year. Now, let's begin. The story kicks off in Media's residential with a jolt. Our builder hero respawns at a lonely bed on a windswept hill, inventory empty, a single map fragment in hand that points to something called the heart of the overworld. And then the movie smash cuts back to day one to show how everything unraveled. From there it follows a classic quest skeleton but plays with perspective and time like a speedrunner who still stops to pet the wolves. The film toggles between day counters and nighttime sequences, using the sun-moon cycle as a heartbeat while slipping in flashbacks through the book and quill journal entries the hero writes and later rereads after respawn. The inciting incident is a beautifully chaotic creeper siege that exposes a deeper threat. The deep dark is spreading under the village and a chorus of skulk sensors is listening for a portal key, meaning random noise can awaken something worse than a blown-up fence. Act 1 pairs the hero with a redstone prodigy who thinks in circuits and a ranger who knows every biome by smell, and their dynamic becomes the movie's crafting table. Ideas, ingredients, friction, and spark. The first big turn lands when they trade with piglins and learn the map fragment is one of 4 coordinates to a stronghold even the Endermen avoid. The hero glimpses an Enderman POV sequence where the world is a lattice of vibrations and eye contact burns, a playful flex with perspective that also foreshadows how attention and observation shape danger here. Midpoint is pure nether opera. The team builds a lava-born flying machine to cross a basalt delta, only to be betrayed by a masked griefer who wants the heart to switch the world to a kind of permanent hardcore mode, where death has meaning because it's final. Their portal is shattered, the ranger is dragged into the deep dark, and hope plummets with the Y level. The long night of the soul happens literally underground, where silence becomes a weapon and the warden turns movement into doom. The hero chooses patience over bravado, learning to mine, wait, and listen, and that calm flips the theme from power to stewardship. In the climb toward Act 3, the redstone prodigy rigs a chain of TNT dupers not to destroy but to carve safe corridors that reroute skulk growth, a crafty inversion of explosion as creation, and the village rallies to build rails, boats, and a beacon network that stitches the world together. The finale in the end is a 3-phase ballet. First, towers fall not through brute force but cooperative grappling and piston tricks. Second, the hero confronts the griefer with a choice rather than a sword, undercutting the zero-sum logic the villain worships. Third, the dragon's defeat is staged as a release, not a kill, turning victory into restoration. The emotional payoff loops back to that opening respawn. The bed on the hill is still there, but this time the inventory is full. Of friends, of plans, of seeds. And the map fragment becomes a community blueprint, suggesting the real endgame isn't beating the world, it's building one worth returning to. What makes the characters pop is that each one starts with an inventory of flaws, not tools, and every upgrade in gear mirrors an upgrade in mindset. The builder hero begins as a speedcrafter who treats the world like a checklist, hut, pickaxe, portal, flex, until the first respawn strips away swagger and forces them to ask why they build at all, not just how. That shift from output to intention is the spine of their arc, and you can feel it in tiny choices, like swapping a sword for a shield in the deep dark or placing torches not to rush a path, but to leave it for others. The Redstone Prodigy, meanwhile, is comedy and chaos personified, a walking contraption whose early solutions are louder than the problems. Clock loops that overheat, piston doors for empty rooms, TNT that solves conversations. Yet the betrayal at the basalt delta knocks the wind out of their ego. Teaching the village kids to wire their first observers becomes the turning point. And the climactic corridor carving device is less a flex than a love letter to collaboration. The ranger starts as a biome nomad with a rule against attachments because attachments get pulled into the darkness. When the warden drags them under, the film weaponizes silence as character development, and the return is framed not as a rescue but as an acceptance. Trusting others to move when you must stand still, letting someone else hold the torch while you listen for the heartbeat beneath the stone. The masked griefer isn't evil for evil's sake. Their hardcore ideology is born from grief, a backstory of losing a co-op world to careless chaos, and the plan to force permanence is a twisted way to make meaning stick. Every encounter with them tempts the hero to treat people like systems, and the final confrontation works because the hero refuses that reduction, offering grace without absolution. Even the dragon and warden operate as mirrors, embodiments of consequence rather than bosses. The dragon's release reframes victory as repair, pushing the hero to measure success by what survives after the credits. Relationships drive every set piece. Piglin barters become trust exercises, village markets double as town halls, and the beacon network is literally a web of shared light. When beams converge over the stronghold, it reads as found family mapped onto the sky. By the end, the party's stats have changed in ways no enchantment table can show. The builder crafts for others, the prodigy builds to be understood, the ranger stays to make the map safer, and even the griefer removes the mask, finally looking without the filter of fear. It's character growth told in recipes, not speeches. Take 1 part skill, 1 part scar, add community, and smelt until stronger. What sells the illusion is how the cast plays the world's physics like an instrument. The lead doesn't just act brave, they act block brave. Movements a touch squared off, head tilts that lock like camera ticks, and a purposeful rhythm to mining, crafting, and combat that builds character in the negative space between actions. So even placing a torch feels like a moral choice, not a prop cue. Their voice carries that same economy, low and steady in the deep dark, then cracking on the first sight of a warden, giving fear texture without melodrama, and later warming into a mentor cadence when teaching villagers to defend the perimeter. The Redstone Prodigy steals scenes with timing that snaps like a comparator, line deliveries tumble in rapid chains, then halt on a dime for a beat of awe whenever an idea works, and the physical comedy, yanking on a lever with too much hope, getting bonked by a misfiring piston, lands because the performer lets embarrassment breathe instead of racing to the next gag. During the corridor carving sequence, they play the switch from spectacle to responsibility entirely in the eyes, shoulders, dropping as the contraption's purpose shifts from "watch me" to "stand behind me." The ranger anchors the trio with a tracker's poise. There's a patient, near-documentary stillness to how they listen to caves, count heartbeats between skulk pulses, and notch arrows only when a path is truly safe. And when the warden drags them under, the return scene is a quiet masterclass in post-trauma restraint. No speeches, just a careful grip that loosens, step by step, as trust returns. The masked griefer could have been a cartoon. Instead, the performance threads hurt through bravado, letting the voice harden when control is threatened and soften whenever the old co-op is mentioned, so the final unmasking lands as a choice rather than a reveal. Around them, the ensemble works like a village in perfect light level. Piglin traders who grunt with entrepreneurial pride, a librarian whose deadpan undercuts panic, a shepherd who turns a fleeing flock into a moving wall of wool, each supporting player calibrated to bounce energy back to the leads. Even non-human presences feel performed. The Ender Dragon's aerial arcs read like intention, the warden's head tilt registers curiosity before rage, thanks to animation matched with motion work that honors the game's grammar. Together, the cast doesn't just sell the stakes, they craft them, one precise beat at a time. The director treats the Minecraft world like a musical instrument and a sandbox at once, shaping tone by deciding which game rules become cinematic rules and which to bend for emotion. Shots breathe with the sun-moon cycle, so daytime sequences feel expansive and playful with wide, almost map-like compositions that celebrate scale, while night and underground scenes contract into close, claustrophobic frames where silence and careful sound design carry more weight than any scream. Stylistically, there's a joyful literalism. Camera moves echo-blocky motions, Pans step in discrete increments like a player turning with keyboard ticks, yet the filmmaker resists mimicry for its own sake, allowing rounded emotional beats through human gestures. A miner's hands fumble with a pick, a slow pull on a lever becomes a small moral decision. Pacing is thoughtfully hybrid. Crafting montages accelerate like a speedrun montage, montage cuts snapping to inventory swaps and redstone clicks, then the pace deliberately slows in sequences with the warden or the deep dark so that tension is built by absence of light, of noise, of motion, and the audience has to listen. Shot composition plays with the grid. Symmetry and negative space are used to stage moral choice. Villagers arranged against a horizon become a chorus line of stakes, while asymmetrical, off-grid framing signals disorder or grief. Visual vocabulary borrows from the game, beacon shafts, chunky silhouettes, voxel silhouettes, but filters them through cinematic tools. Depth of field to isolate a face beneath a helmet, motion blur on a falling dragon wing to sell mass, long aerial crane moves to reveal biome transitions as a single-stitched world. The director leans into inventive transitions, respawn fades that feel like a soft reset, inventory flashes that double as memory cues, and redstone-triggered cuts that synchronize edits to mechanical clicks, so technical craft becomes narrative punctuation. There's an embrace of practical motion capture for creature work and puppetry influences to make the warden and dragon feel improvised and reactive rather than purely CGI set pieces, and the color palette shifts with thematic beats. Warm golds for community building scenes, cold cyan and slate where isolation and consequence spread. Sound and music act like another character. Sparse piano motifs for moments of stewardship, percussive redstone motifs during invention, and a near absence of score at key beats to let environmental audio, wind over plains, the hollow thump of a distant block breaking, dictate mood. Overall, the director's hand is unmistakable in how constraints are treated as opportunities, turning the game's limitations into a coherent cinematic grammar that allows wonder, tension, and inventive problem-solving to live in the same frame without flattening either. Cinematography in this film acts like a translator that turns the game's blocky grammar into a readable, emotional movie language, so every choice in lens, angle, and light feels purposeful rather than decorative. Wide aerials treat biomes like painted maps. Slow crane pulls and sweeping drone-like moves reveal mountain ridges, rivers, and patchwork villages as if unfolding an explorer's map, while intimate scenes prefer tight lenses and shallow depth of field so that a miner's calloused hand or a single torch suddenly carries meaning. Camera angles are used like tools. Low-angle framing makes the warden and the dragon feel monumental without resorting to CGI bravado. Top-down compass shots give the audience a player's strategic viewpoint during planning and raids, and sudden Dutch tilts or off-kilter framing signal when the world's rules wobble, like during a griefer's sabotage, so visual anxiety complements narrative betrayal. Lighting is a character in itself. Motivated sources, torches, redstone lamps, beacons, create warm pools that invite the eye and carve the void in between, while low-key setups in the deep dark use almost complete blackness punctured by microlights so tension is sculpted by what remains unseen. The film embraces volumetrics. Beacon shafts cut through dust and rain with godlike beams, and sunlight through oak leaves becomes tangible pixels of warmth, while cooler cyan and slate tones populate cave and nether sequences, making the palette a direct echo of emotional beats. Framing leverages the grid. Symmetric, centered compositions read as order and community, villagers lined against a horizon, and intentional negative space lets solitude breathe. Frames within frames, doorways, mine shafts, window grills, are repeated motifs that trap characters visually when they are trapped emotionally. There are a handful of visually striking set pieces that feel choreographed rather than flashy. A creeper siege filmed with handheld immediacy and whip pans so explosions are felt in the actors' reactions rather than shown as spectacle. A long tracking shot on the lava-flying contraption that holds on the crew as the world rushes by, stitching suspense and vertigo, and the end confrontation staged as a three-act visual ballet. Crane lifts expose the ruined towers. Telephoto compression makes distance feel intimate during the strategy beats, and slow motion punctuates the dragon's last arc so its defeat reads as release instead of carnage. Technical flourishes are woven into storytelling. Subtle rack focus shifts guide the eye from map to face, inventory swaps flash as layered overlays sync to cut timing, and redstone-triggered camera edits tie mechanical clicks to cinematic punctuation. Creature work is photographed with mixed techniques. Motion capture anchors performance while practical light rigs cell scale, so even non-human presences read as responsive. Ultimately, cinematography here doesn't merely show a world. It composes that world's moods, wonder, threat, and repair, so that every angle and shadow amplifies the film's emotional beats and makes the pixelated feel palpably alive. Editing here works like a redstone engineer with a stopwatch. Every cut is a tiny machine that either accelerates a thrill or gives the audience space to breathe, and the film plays that toolkit smartly. Fast, punchy montages sprint through crafting and build sequences with inventory swaps, quick match cuts from hand to block, and snap edits that mimic a speedrun. These keep momentum high when the film wants to feel playful and kinetic. By contrast, sequences in the deep dark or the warden's stalking zones use long takes, quiet lapses, and almost imperceptible edits so tension is generated by what the camera refuses to cut away from. Silence becomes an edit choice as powerful as any jump cut. The editor uses J-cuts and L-cuts to smooth transitions between biome moods. Sound from the next scene often bleeds in before the picture changes, or a torch's clink lingers over the next shot to stitch emotional continuity, while clever match-on-action cuts make mechanical actions feel seamless. Swinging a pick in one shot matches a block breaking in another, so the audience reads cause and effect without being told. Cross-cutting is a go-to for communal stakes. While the hero sneaks into a stronghold, we cut to villagers fortifying gates, which turns personal peril into shared concern and gives the finale a networked urgency. The nether flight is edited as a single-held tracking beat with sparse cuts to preserve vertigo, whereas the creeper siege is a staccato collage of reaction shots, approaching silhouettes, and explosion hits that land hard because the edits land on actors' gasps rather than just the blast. Redstone-driven edits are a delightful motif. The click of a comparator or the clang of a lever often cues a precise cut, turning mechanical sounds into rhythm instruments. There are places the editing risks overdoing montage. Repeated crafting beats can dull stakes if not punctuated with human moments, so the film wisely trims redundancy, privileging a single, well-constructed montage over sequence after sequence of similar setups. Pacing also answers character beats. The prodigy's inventions get quick, joke-ready cuts early, then slower, reverent coverage when those inventions carry real consequence. The ranger's moments of listening are honored with silence and slow dissolve so recovery feels earned. In climactic crosscuts, the editor balances spectacle and intimacy by alternating wide, world-revealing shots with close, performance-driven beats so catastrophe reads as a communal choreography rather than empty pyrotechnics, and the final respawn transitions are handled as subtle, almost invisible cuts that flip time without jolting the emotional thread. The soundtrack here is half instrumental score and half world-building device. Music that doesn't just sit under the picture but stitches game sounds and emotion together so the film's audio feels like another kind of crafting table. Right away you hear a palette that mixes warm acoustic instruments, wood-plucked strings, marimba-like mallets, a solo piano with lots of space, with electronic textures and carefully sampled in-world noises. The click of a comparator becomes a rhythmic tick, the soft thunk of a block place is layered into percussion, and note block timbers are stretched into ambient pads so the game's sonic identity is always present without turning the score into a pastiche. The composer writes clear leitmotifs that evolve. The builder's theme begins as a simple two-note motif, almost like a player's first crafting cue. As the hero learns patience and community, the motif is reharmonized with fuller strings, counterpoint from a plaintive woodwind, and finally choir fragments that read like a communal hum. The Redstone Prodigy's music is percussive and kinetic, xylophone patterns, offset arpeggios, and glitchy pulses that sync to mechanical edits, while the ranger gets sparse drones, a low-register cello line, and breathy flutes that sound like wind through pine needles, anchoring the film's quieter, listening moments. There's masterful use of silence. Deep dark sequences strip nearly all score so the warden's presence is defined by subsonic pulses and a single low horn that acts almost like a heartbeat. Those absences make the later return of motif-laden strings feel earned rather than manipulative. Standout cues act like set pieces. The Nether aria trades orchestral heat for metallic percussion and a brass chorus that throbs like distant magma. The Nether flight is a single soaring phrase built from layered synths and a soaring violin line that gives vertigo and triumph at once. The end confrontation unfolds in 3 musical acts that mirror the visuals: a brittle, dissonant opening, a tense contrapuntal middle where character motifs argue, and a final, cathartic release where melodic lines converge into a hymn-like chorus that treats victory as restoration. Diegetic player music is used cleverly. Villager chants, piglin bargaining rhythms, and a lullaby hummed by a librarian become motifs the score borrows and reframes so the world and the orchestra share material. Mixing and sound design are tightly integrated. Environmental audio bleeds into the mix so a torch's sizzle may sit inside a string swell, and dynamic range is respected so intimate emotional beats remain quiet and human while large set pieces open up into full orchestral color without flattening nuance. Overall, the music behaves like a master crafter. Simple materials combined in clever ways, recurring motifs that change as characters change, and silence used as a tool so the score supports feeling and story rather than smothering it. At the heart of the movie lie a handful of tidy but surprisingly nimble themes that keep shifting shape as the world gets built, burned, and rebuilt. Creation versus conquest, stewardship versus domination, the real cost of permanence, and how attention, what we look at, listen to, and keep, becomes the clearest form of power. The film toys with the game's mechanics to make those ideas visceral. Respawn is turned from a neat player convenience into a philosophical hinge that asks whether meaning comes from consequence or from care. When the hero's swagger is stripped by death, the story makes patience and repair feel weightier than high scores. Creation is framed as an act of community rather than ego. The montage beats that show villagers laying planks and sharing seeds speak to building as social glue, while redstone inventions move from solo showpieces to tools that scaffold safety and passage for others, so technology is neither idolized nor demonized but judged by its purpose. Opposing that is the griefer's hardcore logic, wanting to lock the world into permanence as a way of making loss matter, which the film treats as a grief-driven ideology rather than cartoon evil. By confronting that perspective with choices instead of swordplay, the narrative probes whether forcing meaning is cruelty dressed as order. Environmental stewardship sneaks in beneath the adventure. Skulk growth and the deep dark function like unchecked systems that feed on noise and neglect, teaching that silence, listening, and selective intervention can be as powerful as dynamite. Friendship, too, is thematic engineering. The beacon network and rail lines are literal metaphors for interdependence, and the story continually recasts individual skill as communal capital. What one builds alone can be stolen, but what many build together becomes inheritance. There's a running tension between playfulness and seriousness, where the film honors the joyful improvisation of crafting while also acknowledging trauma. Loss, betrayal, and trauma are not dismissed with a montage but handled as processes that change how characters build and trust. Moral complexity is a favorite trick. Bosses like the Warden and the Dragon are less moral absolutes than mirror objects that force characters to reassess motives. Victory is framed as restoration, not conquest, which complicates the usual, defeat the monster payoff. Finally, the movie is quietly about pedagogy, how games teach social skill, restraint, and empathy. So many scenes play like lessons turned into spectacle. Trade a bartered item, repair a bridge, teach a child to wire an observer, choose grace over finality. The themes don't sit on the surface, they're embedded in recipes, timed by sunsets, and measured in the hum of beacons and the hush of caves, so the film's ideas are learned by doing rather than lectured at you. Visual effects here act like a set of careful stagehands, obvious when you look, invisible when you need to feel, because the film chooses a coherent aesthetic rather than chasing photorealism. The VFX team preserves the game's blocky identity while giving it cinematic weight, so materials read as tangible without losing their voxel charm. That means shaders are deliberately restrained, clean, crisp edges, controlled specular highlights, and a slightly simplified PBR workflow. So a wooden plank has grain but still reads like a block, and close-ups earn extra micro-detail only where an actor actually touches a surface. Practical effects are used whenever human contact matters. Full-scale block sets, real torches and levers, rigs for rocking platforms and a puppet head for the Warden's near shots give actors something tactile to react to. Those elements are then extended digitally. Digital limbs, scale changes, and whole-body motion capture performances fill out the creatures in wider or aerial shots. Creature work is a hybrid, motion capture and keyframe animation blend to keep movements readable and slightly stylized, while practical animatronics sell scale and breadth in intimate beats. Environmental VFX lean on procedural systems, volumetric beacon shafts and god rays that feel like voxel light, particle-driven skulk tendrils that pulse to audio cues, and magma/smoke sims in the nether, all cached and art-directed so chaos never overwhelms composition. The team also uses a clever mix of real-time engines for previs and some in-camera effects, helpful for sync with actors and for the flying contraption sequence, and offline renders for final lighting and GI to make sure live-action plates and CG elements share the same shadow logic. Compositing is subtle craft. Lens-matched bloom, grain, chromatic aberration, and consistent color grading tie layers together so a CG dragon wing and a stunt performer's harness look like the same world. Match moving and on-set tracking markers keep inventory overlays and HUD-style graphics anchored without feeling intrusive. VFX are used narratively. Redstone glows pulse with the editing rhythm. Block breaks are staged with layered debris and timed camera cuts so destruction reads as consequence rather than spectacle, and the respawn effect blends practical flash with digital morphs that feel like a soft reset. Where effects risk distraction is in over-polishing. Too slick reflections or over-blurred edges would erase the game's tactile identity, and overly busy particle fields can steal focus from actors. The film avoids these traps by limiting spectacle to moments that serve character or theme. In short, digital craft supports performance and storytelling. Practical things touch, digital things extend, and the sum keeps the pixelated world feeling lived in rather than just rendered. Set design treats the movie's world like a playable museum. Every prop, wall, and skyline is built so it can be read at a glance and touched by an actor, which makes the pixelated aesthetic feel lived in rather than plastic. Production built full-scale voxel sets for village streets, library stacks, and the stronghold's corridors so actors could open real chests, flip real book and quills, and lean on blocky parapets, then used careful digital extension to stretch those environments into vast biomes. Close-ups earn extra texture, scuffed wood, soot-darkened torch handles, seam lines on stone, while wider shots keep the clean, geometric silhouette that nods to the game. Location choices add narrative weight. Open plains and farm terraces stage community beats and market scenes. A real quarry with stepped benches becomes the deep dark when lit and dressed with sculpt tendrils. Basalt fields and lava-scarred locations provide visceral, practical nether plates, and huge soundstage builds house the end's monolithic towers where scale matters more than photorealism. Props are designed to perform. Levers and piston rigs are practical and mechanized for actors to trigger. Crafting tables hold readable tools and labeled ingredient sacks. Redstone contraptions are built to click and hum on set so performances sync to real rhythms rather than phantom VFX cues. And market stalls overflow with tactile goods, bundles of seeds, worn maps, stamped chests, that anchor social life. Visual motifs repeat in set dressing. Grids, repeating doorways, stitched beams of light from beacons, to reinforce theme as well as composition, and color palettes are biome-specific so a warm ochre village reads as safety while cyan-lit caves read as threat. Design also solves filmmaking problems. Modular block sections allow quick reconfiguration for stunts and camera moves, embedded tracking markers and built-in lighting rigs make compositing smoother, and practical creature puppets and animatronic heads let actors react authentically before digital augmentation. Small, lovingly observed details, chipped pickaxe handles, faded banners, a child's crudely drawn map pinned to a wall, do the heavy lifting of believability, so locations aren't just backdrops but active places that suggest histories, economies, and rituals. Dialogue in this film acts less like exposition and more like toolcraft. Short, purposeful lines that feel like inventory slots, compact, useful, and sometimes hilarious, while longer beats arrive only when the scene earns a breath. The script smartly distinguishes registers so characters speak in ways that reveal who they are without spelling it out. The builder talks in measures and materials, swapping metaphors for recipes. I used to build trophies. Now I build bridges. The redstone prodigy speaks in bright, improvised similes and rapid-fire jokes that break tension and sell ingenuity. Give me a lever and 3 bad ideas, and I'll build a highway. The ranger uses sparse, almost pastoral phrasing that makes silence feel intentional. Listen first. The world tells its secrets in pauses, and the griefer's lines are pitched like a philosopher in grief, cold logic wrapped in personal loss so you can almost see the wound under the rhetoric. If everything is replaceable, nothing mattered. I'm trying to make loss mean something. Ensemble and background voices are written with generous detail. Traders have clipped bargaining rhythms, librarians mutter sort logic that becomes comic relief, kids repeat simple refrains that later turn into motifs, so the world sounds lived in rather than scripted. The screenplay avoids clunky info dumps by using diegetic devices. Map reading, book and quill journal entries, and market barters communicate lore and stakes through action, and callbacks to those verbal beats pay off emotionally later, turning throwaway quips into earned moments. Humor is a blend of game-savvy banter and human awkwardness. Lines like, I've got 2 stacks of patience and 1 of bad decisions land because they're anchored in character rhythm, not novelty. Emotional writing shows restraint. Grief scenes are brief but specific, often a single line that opens like a door. We lost a world once. We cannot lose being kind again. And the film trusts silence to carry the rest, so dialogue and quiet alternate like tools chosen for the job. Recurring verbal motifs, respawn as metaphor, map as promise, beacon as signal, thread the script so thematic ideas feel inevitable rather than sermonized. Where the script sometimes trips is in early exposition when stakes need quick setup. A couple of scenes lean on gamer jargon that might briefly exclude non-players, though clever analogies and human beats quickly repair that gap. Standout lines define character and theme rather than show off cleverness. The builder's bridge line, the ranger's listening rule, the griefer's grief-driven creed, and a simple late film line that reframes the quest. A map is only a promise until people walk it. These are the sort of memorable lines that double as moral tools, easy to quote and hard to forget. Overall, the writing balances wit, heart, and economy. It gives actors room to play, lets silence speak when needed, and seeds small conversational details that blossom into major emotional payoffs. Genre-wise, the film is a confident mashup that sits at the intersection of family adventure, survival thriller, and clever puzzle comedy rather than leaning fully on any single label. And that hybrid identity is its biggest strength because it borrows familiar genre beats only to bend them into something fresh. At first glance, it hits a lot of expected notes: the assembled team, the map-based quest, the underground terror, the final confrontation, but the movie refuses to treat those beats as checklist items. Instead, it reframes them through game mechanics, so a planning sequence reads like a heist board, route maps, redstone schematics, rehearsal runs, rather than a cliché build-up. And a boss fight becomes a choreography of engineering rather than glorified violence. Action set pieces deliver crowd-pleasing spectacle, creeper sieges that double as chaotic slapstick, a lava ship flight that sells vertigo without losing character focus, and the end finale staged as a three-phase tactical ballet. But the film balances those moments with real suspense. Deep dark sequences that trade flashy cuts for long, patient coverage and environmental horror, where listening and restraint create tension more effectively than non-stop bangs. Humor arrives organically from character rhythms and the world's rules. Redstone gags and barter jokes ease stakes and provide breathing room, never undercutting the emotional moments because the script reserves silence and restrained beats for trauma and grief. Drama is grounded in motivations: the griefer's hardcore ideology born from loss, the ranger's trauma, rather than invented melodrama, which gives heavier moments real weight because consequences matter in this universe. Respawn is treated as philosophical, not just a mechanic. The film subverts several genre conventions. Victory is restoration, not conquest. Technology is judged by purpose instead of glamorized. And villainy is humanized into a cautionary viewpoint rather than cardboard evil. Even the final boss is handled as a choice rather than a simple kill. That said, familiar scaffolding remains: team tropes, betrayal beats, and an ultimate showdown, which might feel comfortingly conventional to some viewers, but the movie usually retools these tropes so they serve theme and problem-solving rather than lazy spectacle. Tonal transitions are handled with care, editing, sound, and performance smooth between giddy invention and quiet dread, so the genre blend feels deliberate. You get laughs, puzzles, real scares, and moments of heartfelt repair without any one element flattening the others. In short, the film executes genre as a toolkit to be remixed, not a rulebook to be followed, and that inventive recombination is what keeps it surprising and satisfying. The film uses its blocky mechanics as a surprisingly nimble language for contemporary social commentary, slipping ideas into gameplay moments so they feel like discoveries rather than lectures. The skulk sensors and the deep dark red as metaphors for surveillance and runaway systems that feed on noise and neglect, which quietly nods to our attention economy where shouting louder can make a problem worse. The griefer's desire to lock the world into permanent consequence becomes a study in how grief and control can harden into authoritarian impulses, an argument about making loss meaningful by denying repair rather than by cultivating care. Alongside that, there's a running interrogation of digital ownership and the value we place on virtual things. Respawn as a mechanic becomes a philosophical hinge about whether consequence or care creates meaning, and scenes where characters barter, share seeds, and build communal beacons advocate commons-based stewardship over solo trophy building. Environmental notes sneak in via set and system. Skulk growth, scoured biomes, and reckless mining stand in for real-world extraction and ecological externalities, teaching restraint and listening as tools of repair. The movie also gestures to culture around play and pedagogy. Games as social tutors that teach negotiation, trust, and technical literacy are celebrated rather than dismissed, so the film doubles as a defense of playful learning in a world that often separates work from play. It handles trauma with subtlety. Loss, betrayal, and the need for ritualized repair are treated as processes, not plot beats, so difficult topics land in human-sized moments rather than banner statements. Even the film's adaptation impulse functions as commentary. Bringing a participatory medium to cinema forces questions about commodification, fandom stewardship, and who gets to tell communal stories. And the film answers not by nostalgia alone but by imagining a culture that rebuilds together, disputes, and then teaches the next players how to do better. Audience engagement here is almost engineered. Scenes are staged to pull different reactions out of the crowd like tools from an inventory, so laughter, tears, excitement, and genuine shock arrive in predictable but satisfying beats that still feel earned. The redstone gags and market banter crackle with comic timing that gets immediate, shareable laughs, while the creeper siege and sudden betrayal supply that startled collective gasp theater audiences love, and quieter, human moments. An offhand line about a lost co-op world, a single child's map pinned to a wall, the ranger's slow, measured return, land in a way that makes eyes go glassy without melodrama. Excitement lives in the film's kinetic set pieces, the lava flight, the coordinated beacon lift, and troubleshooting a stronghold heist, scenes built so that applause and "did you see that?" chatter are natural byproducts, and shock is reserved for well-timed inversions, a trusted face revealed as a griefer, the warden's sudden charge, rather than manufactured jump scares. The movie invites repeat viewings because it layers information, visual Easter eggs and set dressing, leitmotifs in the score that evolve subtly, redstone solutions that reward a second watch, and book and quill entries or map fragments that foreshadow plot turns, so fans will re-watch to catch tiny setups that become payoffs. That layering fuels discussion. Chat threads will argue griefer ethics, whether Respawn cheapens consequence or teaches stewardship, which redstone trick was realistically possible, and which character arc read truest, so the film doubles as a conversation starter and a puzzle box. It also translates well to communal experiences. Families find kid-friendly wonder in the building beats, streamers get haulable moments for reaction content, and educators can mine the movie for lessons about collaboration and systems thinking. Memes and quotable lines, a terse "listen first," or "a map is only a promise until people walk it," are practically baked in, and the score's recurring motifs make for emotional callbacks in trailers and highlight reels. Even the film's quieter design choices, the way silence is used, the pace of mining scenes, the deliberate framing of community builds, nudge viewers toward empathy and care, so engagement isn't only about spectacle but about feeling invested in a world you can imagine repairing. The result is a film that not only aims for immediate crowd reactions but sets up a longer cultural conversation about play, permanence, and what we owe each other in virtual and real worlds, and sends people out wanting to boot the game, rewatch the sequence, or argue with friends about what the griefer should have done next. Put this Minecraft movie next to other game-to-film adaptations and the differences jump out like a beacon shaft. Where some adaptations either flatten a game's systems into a bland plot or lean so hard into nostalgia that newcomers get lost, this film treats gameplay mechanics as narrative grammar, using respawn, crafting, and redstone logic to shape character choices and story beats rather than as mere set dressing. Think of the LEGO Movie's meta-savvy affection for its source. This film borrows that confidence in world-specific humor and emotional core, but swaps LEGO's manic metafiction for a quieter, systems-minded morality play about stewardship and consequence. Compared with Warcraft-style adaptations that struggled under the weight of lore and spectacle, the Minecraft movie is much smarter about onboarding. It conveys rules through action and objects, map fragments, book and quill entries, barters, so both players and non-players understand stakes without lengthy expositional dumps. On the family adventure end, it shares Sonic or Detective Pikachu's hybrid of CGI characters and live-action warmth, yet it avoids the trap of turning creatures into mere mascot props by giving practical puppetry and motion capture weight so performances feel reactive and earned. Where Angry Birds or some franchise spin-offs opted for slapstick and merchandising-friendly beats, this film resists turning every sequence into a gag reel. Humor exists but is balanced with genuine suspense and moments of silence that let themes land. Visually and technically it sits in a different lane from straight-up spectacle films. Instead of photorealism for its own sake, the movie preserves voxel identity while using cinematic tools to add scale and texture, so its VFX and sets read as coherent extensions of the game rather than cosmetic overlays. Narratively it also plays with genre expectations. Many adaptations default to beat-for-beat action climaxes, but this one reframes conflict as engineering puzzles and communal problem-solving, which feels fresh next to the usual monster fight payoffs. If you map it against a director's typical filmography, imagine a filmmaker known for intimate character beats applying that sensitivity to a large IP. Suddenly set pieces are small and human-scaled, and spectacle exists to illuminate relationships rather than replace them. Conversely, a director known for blockbuster set pieces would find here a rewarding restraint, where silence and cadence do heavy lifting. The movie's willingness to humanize antagonists, to use game mechanics philosophically, and to privilege repair over conquest gives it a distinctive identity among adaptations. It's less about translating a property and more about translating a mode of play into a cinematic ethic, which makes it feel both comfortably familiar and inventively its own. Symbolism in the film works like a second language beneath the plot. Small objects, repeated visuals, and mechanical motifs double as moral shorthand so the story's ideas get taught by doing rather than said aloud. The most obvious symbol is the map fragment. It's both quest token and promise, literal coordinates that become a metaphor for intention. Maps only mean anything when people walk them, so fragments scattered across the world speak to fragmented responsibility that must be reassembled by communal labor. Respawn and the bed are used again and again as a symbol of continuity and ethical choice. The opening bed on the hill reads at first as convenience, but repeated shots turn it into a question about what you return to and why. and the hero's final return with a full inventory reframes Respawn as relational rather than trivial. Redstone pulses and comparator clicks function as a heartbeat motif. When redstone stutters, the camera cuts tighten. When it hums steadily, the world is in order, so circuitry becomes emotional rhythm. Beacons and their shafts of light act as literal metaphors for connection and guidance. Converging beams mark not just a tactical advantage but a moral skyline, a visual proof that networks of care are visible from afar. Skulk growth and the deep dark serve as ecological and social metaphors. Spread by noise and neglect, they dramatize how systems feed on attention and chaos, making silence, listening, and selective intervention into ethical acts. The Griefer's mask and hardcore creed are symbolic of grief weaponized into ideology. The mask hides a person who wants permanence as a cure for loss, and removing it is staged as a crucial moral denuding. Tools and props double as ethical choices, swapping a sword for a shield, placing torches for posterity, or building rails instead of walls, all signal shifting values from conquest to stewardship. Visual motifs, grids, doorways framing characters, repeated negative space, frame moments of choice and entrapment, while color shifts, warm village ochres versus cyan deep dark, mark moral temperature. Even the creatures act symbolically. The warden embodies consequence and listening, the dragon represents release versus domination, and their treatments, motion that's patient or theatrical, mirror thematic lessons. Diegetic music and sound design reinforce symbols. A two-note crafting motif that grows into a communal chorus makes the film's ethics feel earned, and inventory sounds threaded through score tie mechanic to meaning. Altogether, the film layers metaphor like stacked blocks so the narrative can be enjoyed as a family adventure while rewarding viewers who look for the seams that hold its moral architecture together. If you treat the movie as either the opening chapter of a franchise or as a one-off adaptation, its placement in a larger context matters in different but fascinating ways. As the first cinematic statement about a famously player-driven universe, it necessarily moves from emergent play to fixed narrative, and that act of canon-making has big ripple effects. Characters, rules, and motifs that were previously communal improvisations suddenly become reference points that other media, toys, tie in. Books, animated shorts, game updates, can riff on. The film can therefore act like a blueprint that codifies certain myths, who or what the warden truly is, how Respawn works emotionally rather than mechanically, the cultural meaning of beacons, and gives future storytellers shared soil to cultivate sequels or spin-offs. In a franchise scenario, the movie functions as a launchpad. Recurring threads, the heart of the overworld, the map fragments, the Redstone Prodigy's inventions, become serial hooks that allow the narrative to expand into origin stories, anthology episodes focused on other biomes, or even serialized television that explores server communities and political tensions between villages. Each new installment can either double down on the film's thematic emphasis on stewardship and collaboration or deliberately pivot to examine consequences, how codifying Respawn changes player culture, what happens when a beacon network becomes political. Creative continuity matters here. If the same director or writing team returns, tonal and thematic threads can deepen into a cohesive mythos. If the IP stewards hand the next chapter to a different voice, the franchise may become an anthology that embraces different interpretations of the game's grammar. Both paths have trade-offs between consistency and creative freshness. From a fan culture angle, the movie sits in a delicate negotiation with emergent community narratives. Minecraft's strength is that players author their own stories. The film's official choices could be embraced, adapted into server lore and machinima, or resisted by fans who prefer living, mutable worlds. The best-case scenario is symbiosis. Film elements enter fandom as new building blocks that catalyze fresh creations rather than policing them. If you flip the question to historical film logic, how accurately a cinematic retelling should represent a source, then the metric shifts. Fidelity becomes less about copying textures and more about honoring the experiential truth of the medium. Does the film feel like play? Does it capture improvisation, discovery, and the social pedagogy of the game? In either frame, the production's industrial context matters too. Mojang/Microsoft's involvement, licensing choices, and marketing strategies will shape whether the film is a tightly controlled IP product or a porous cultural node that invites cross-media experiments, educational tie-ins, Redstone as STEM curricula, and community-driven expansions. The movie's historical footprint, its contribution to the lineage of game-to-film adaptations, will be judged on whether it translates play into a sustainable narrative language without flattening the game's participatory roots. It can either be the film that crystallizes a playable ethic into popular myth or one entertaining detour among many adaptations, but either way its choices about canon tone and openness to fan remixing determine whether it merely mirrors the game or becomes the next stone in Minecraft's cultural architecture. Budget and box office for a film like this behave less like a single verdict and more like a network of interlocking systems. Production choices, marketing spend, release timing, IP leverage, and ancillary revenue all pulse together to create profit or loss. So to answer whether the movie was a success, you have to read several signals, not a single number. On the production side, the film's aesthetic choices, full-scale voxel sets, practical puppetry for creature close-ups, targeted VFX extensions rather than wall-to-wall CGI, point to a mid-range blockbuster budget. Money was spent where actors touch and audiences feel scale, and savings came from deliberate art direction that kept the world stylized rather than photorealistic. That trade-off usually elevates perceived production quality above what the headline budget might suggest because tactile sets and clever hybrid effects by audience goodwill at lower cost than pure CGI spectacles. Box office outcomes split into two clean scenarios. One where IP strength plus smart marketing wins the day, and one where expectation outpaces appetite. In the optimistic scenario, the opening weekend is buoyed by Minecraft's global fanbase, family audiences, and a coordinated creator/streamer push. Early social clips, in-game tie-ins, skins, events, and educator/parent outreach stretch the appeal beyond gamers, so the film posts a healthy opening, then sustains legs thanks to positive word of mouth, modest week-to-week drops, and strong international sales where the brand is massive. That pattern makes ancillary income, streaming rights, merchandising, licensed skins and toys, educational tie-ins, a major profit center and often converts a modest theatrical multiple into a long-term win. The cautious scenario is a front-loaded weekend fueled by curiosity but followed by steep declines if non-player audiences aren't converted or critics and casual viewers feel alienated by jargon or pacing. A heavy opening followed by drops of 50 to 70% in week 2, week per screen averages, and tepid international hold would mark a theatrical disappointment even if post-theatrical deals recoup some costs. Marketing matters more than ever. Cross-platform promotions, early access for family screenings, streamer-driven hype, and visible in-game events dramatically lift awareness and conversion. Poor marketing that misses parents or treats the film as just for players narrows the audience and shortens legs. Important break-even mechanics also apply. P/A and exhibitor splits mean box office alone often needs to reach roughly 2 to 3 times production costs to break even, so streaming pre-buys, merchandise revenue, and licensing can pivot the bottom line from loss to profit. Indicators to watch: strong legs, growing ancillary sales, and durable audience scores signal financial success. Steep weekend drop-offs, weak international traction, and lukewarm merchandise uptake point toward disappointment. Imagine wanting to dive into the world of this film with all its thrills, emotions, and breathtaking moments. You'd naturally ask, where's the best place to experience it? Depending on when you catch it, the film might still be running in select theaters, and that's often where the magic truly hits its peak. The immersive sound design, larger-than-life visuals, and the collective energy of a cinema audience can turn an already engaging story into something unforgettable. But not everyone makes it to the theaters on time, and that's where digital options come in handy. For those who prefer the comfort of their couch, the film is also available on major streaming platforms as a digital rental or purchase. Streaming offers the luxury of pause and replay moments, perfect for catching every subtle glance, hidden symbol, or beautifully shot frame you might have missed in theaters. If you're a stickler for quality, a high-definition rental or a 4K version can bring the details to life, especially if you've got a decent sound system at home. And for those who like to wait things out, it's expected to make its way to popular subscription-based services down the line, letting you revisit or discover it as part of your regular watch list. The key to the fullest impact depends on your setup and mood. Want a shared, booming, big-screen vibe? Hunt down a cinema showing. Craving a cozy night in with complete control over the pacing? Digital rental has your back. This flexibility in viewing options makes the film more accessible than ever, meaning no matter where you are, there's a way to step into its world without missing a beat. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.